So you made it through the first video. Nice job. Also, I'm sitting on the floor of my bedroom because there is AC in here, and yeah, enough said. So the rest of these videos will be much shorter than the first one, hopefully, and they're all just focused on different things that will be helpful to you as a teacher. So there is a packet of information that goes along with this. It's on the Google Drive. So when I send you these videos, they'll be sent to you on the Google Drive, and they will also be sent with the accompanying worksheets and packet of information. So you can always go through with that packet if that's helpful for you. So this one is about differentiation. So basically, differentiation is a fancy word for the idea that you have different students in your class and that these students have different needs that you need to address as a teacher. So it's all based on the idea of what do we teach. So we don't just teach English. We also teach kids how to behave in a classroom. We teach kids how to interact socially, all of these different things. And all of these kids have different needs in terms of each of those things. So the goal of differentiation is, instead of excluding kids because they are different in certain aspects, to celebrate those differences and create an inclusive learning environment. So there are 5 ways to differentiate: through learning styles. Sorry, you can definitely hear my dogs barking. Learning styles, pace, grouping, outcome, and task. So I'm going to go over each one of those. So learning styles is one that you probably have heard about a lot as you're, either in any sort of teacher training course or just in your own life. Nowadays, there are, 15 different learning styles or whatever. We're going to keep it basic. We're going to keep it old school with visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning. So something that I do that I will also upload to the Google Drive is have the volunteers take a learning styles quiz themselves. And I'll explain why in a minute. But with the learning styles quiz, you will learn your own learning style. And then you can kind of see how you learn and how you react to learning. Sorry, my dogs are... Anyways, so a visual learner is the person who is what we usually consider the typical good student. So they sit at the front of the class, they take lots of notes, they might close their eyes to visualize something or remember something. They benefit from illustrations or presentations. They like written or spoken language with a lot of imagery. And they like passive surroundings for learning. So this is someone who would excel in a typical classroom, typically. Then we have auditory learners. So these are the kids who might be sitting in the back and might not be even looking at you while you're teaching, and then you call on them, and they definitely know the answer. They might hum or talk to themselves. They acquire knowledge by reading aloud. And they remember by verbalizing lessons to themselves. And then you have the kinesthetic learner. So this might be the kid who is constantly moving, constantly fiddling with something. And because they're more active, they need to take frequent breaks. They speak with their hands, use lots of gestures. They remember what was done, but have a hard time recalling what was said or seen. And they really do well with interactive activities. Are uncomfortable in classrooms where they lack opportunities for hands-on experience. So just from those descriptions, you can kind of see how an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner might look like they're misbehaving to a teacher, where they're really just learning the way that they learn. Whereas a visual learner will look like the perfect student sitting and taking all of the notes, An auditory learner looks like they're not paying attention, and a kinesthetic learner definitely looks like they're not paying attention a lot of the times because they're constantly fiddling with something, or they're the ones that are up moving around the classroom, maybe being disruptive. So something to take into account, and the reason why I have the teachers take a learning styles quiz is because you typically teach to your own learning style. So I am a visual learner, meaning that I typically structure my lessons to other visual learners. And you have to adjust for that. You have to actively combat your own learning style. When I did this, the teacher training that I'm giving you right now is based on a teacher training that I got after I'd been teaching for about 2.5 years. And the teacher had us go through our own lesson plans for the past week and see how many were just towards our specific learning style. And I found that over 90% of my lessons were towards visual learners, which means that, sure, for the visual learners in my class, I was a great teacher, but for the auditory and the kinesthetic learners, I wasn't doing my job well. So you need to actively combat your own learning style, which is why it's important to know your learning style. The other thing you can do too is you can, for the younger kids, evaluate their learning style based on their behavior. For the older kids, you can give them a learning styles quiz. Whether you give that in Spanish or English, that would be fine. That would be a case where I would say, yeah, totally fine to give that in Spanish. And then you can use that information to better understand your students. So you can group based on learning styles. So for instance, if you have a group of kinesthetic learners, you can group them together and have them be doing a different activity than your visual learners are. You could also give different tasks based on the same outcome. So for example, if what you're looking for is for students to be able to show you that they read and understood a text, you can have them have 3 different options for tasks to show you that they've done that. So you could have them do an activity to show. So the different activities you could have them to do. The different activities you could have them do to show understanding could be to write a paper, make a storyboard, or do a presentation. So that way you're getting your visual, you're getting your auditory, and you're getting your kinesthetic learners opportunities to do what they are, to present their strengths. And to do an activity that is tailored towards them. The other thing you really want to make sure you're doing is repeat the same information in different ways. So for instance, if you present the topic you're learning about in a way tailored towards visual learners, you also want to repeat that same information in a way that's tailored towards auditory learners and in a way that's tailored towards kinesthetic learners. This is why it's really important to include interactive or hands-on activities as much as possible. Kinesthetic learners, in my experience, are the ones that are forgotten the most because they are the students that look like they're misbehaving most of the time. But if you are doing hands-on activities with the information, your kinesthetic learners will excel and they will understand the information. So that's why it's so important. The biggest thing with this is it's no extra work for the teacher. It seems like it is. But really what it is, it's just shifting the way you think about lesson planning and the way you think about structuring your class. And what will end up happening is you might be doing extra work in planning. So instead of just planning 1 activity, you're planning 3, for instance. But your kids are going to learn the information quicker. Your kids are going to remember the information better. Your classes are going to run smoother because your students are going to be engaged and you're not going to have as many problems with discipline. And in general, you're going to walk away from class feeling a lot better and like your class was much more productive. So it ends up being less work on the whole. I will include in the Google Drive an activity sheet. The point of the activity sheet, it's just to get you kind of thinking and brainstorming about how you could do different activities tailored towards different learning types. So it's just sort of more of a brainstorming thing. Online, there's also a ton of resources that are similar to that. So you can take a look at that. All right, so the other ways to differentiate besides learning styles is through pace. So in your classroom, you're going to have a wide range of levels of kids. So you're going to have some kids that are really advanced, and you're going to have some kids that are, you know, not quite with it when it comes to English or when it comes to school in general. That's totally normal. What you want to do is you want to start every activity slowly. So you're starting slow and then building bit by bit. So you're going to start with maybe review, something that everyone in the class knows how to do. You have all of the kids with you, and then bit by bit, you're going to slowly build up, and you're going to lose kids along the way. That's okay. But at least if you start slow, you start the class with everyone with you, and then as you lose kids, you lose them bit by bit. It also is great because it works as a built-in review. So you're always starting with review. You're always starting with something basic that the whole class is with you on, and then you add on the more difficult material. You won't always have every student, but you do need to move on at a certain point, to the next topic, to the next activity. So typically, if you have 75% of the class, that's about right. That's about when it's time to move on. If you stay on the same topic for too long, the kids that are already really, really advanced are going to be bored. And then the other kids, you're going to have, for instance, maybe 1 or 2 kids in each class. You could spend a month on the same topic and they're still not going to get it. Those would be kids that would be really good candidates for resource teaching, like I mentioned in the first video. And that's something that we will talk about more, obviously, when you get here. But yeah, so those would be students that, if you hold the rest of the class back just for those kids, you're really gonna be it's gonna be to the detriment of the kids that are ready to move on to something else. Okay, so the other way you can differentiate is by grouping. So there are 2 ways to group. So the one is by level, so like a lower level, a medium level, a high level, or by mixed levels. So with mixed, it would be where you're pairing a weaker student with a stronger student. There is an obvious problem with that. So, the minute you say that, everyone automatically thinks, okay, well, that means that the weaker student is going to be copying off the stronger student. Is that okay? So basically what you have to do, if you're pairing a weaker student with a stronger student, there is the benefit that the stronger student can be helping the weaker student. So basically can be reteaching the information that you've already taught to the class to that weaker student. And essentially it becomes a one-on-one tutoring session, which helps the stronger student reinforce the knowledge that they already have by explaining it to someone else, and helps the weaker student by having someone on their level teach it to them on a one-to-one basis. But you do have to monitor to make sure that both students are participating. So if you have a worksheet that the students are doing together and the stronger student is doing the entire worksheet alone and the weaker student is turned around and talking to someone else, that's obviously not beneficial. So monitor, walk around, and make sure that they're both working on it. But it is okay if the weaker student is copying off the stronger student. Something that I was told during this teacher training that really did stick with me is that learning a language is an act of courage. So every time you open your mouth in a language that isn't your native language, it is you taking a risk that you're going to say something really, really wrong. It's you in a classroom setting, it's you taking a risk that another kid might laugh at you, or that you're going to make a mistake that, is embarrassing in some way. A kid copying off another kid is the kid saying, I'm not confident enough to do this independently yet. I don't believe I can do this independently. So letting them have that crutch until they are ready to do it independently is okay. And it is going to happen sometimes. What I would say is making sure that they are working together with the stronger student, and then give them encouragement until they're able to do it on their own. So obviously our goal is that the students are not going to be copying off each other and that they're going to be doing the work independently, but they do need encouragement and they do need time to get to that point. And then you also will want to change up the groups frequently. So you don't always want to be doing mixed, and then you don't always want to be doing by level. What you can do is if you're doing a by level, is you can, and again with the idea of pacing, you can start, like for instance, if they're doing a worksheet, you can start the worksheet with the easiest questions at the beginning. So the questions 1 through 4 are really easy. And then you get into some mid-level questions, and then you get into some high-level questions. If you are grouping by level, the low-level students, you will expect them to only get to questions 1 through 4. And you will praise them for what they've accomplished rather than, punishing them for what they didn't get to. For the mid-level students, you're going to expect them to get to level 6, and again, you're going to praise them for what they accomplished. Whereas the high-level students will then have that extra challenge and will be expected to finish the whole worksheet. That gives you the opportunity to, rather than saying, finish this worksheet, you're not working fast enough, to the students that really can't, it gives you the opportunity to say, hey, good, you guys got to question 4. Do you want to try question 5? You did such a good job with questions 1 through 4, and maybe give them that extra little bit of a challenge, but not in a forceful way and not in a way where they're going to be, losing points or punished if they don't get there. Another thing to be aware of, if you're grouping by level, the kids will notice. So here, a lot of times, the kids in the low level will say, "Ay, somos los brutos," which means like, "Oh, we're the brutes, like we're the dumb ones." They will notice. So I change up the groups frequently to kind of avoid the kids feeling like they're constantly in the dumb group. Another way to do this is to do it in stations. So this would be, for instance, you have the class broken into 3 groups: low, medium, and high. And you have one group working with you. You have the other group, and the other 2 groups are working on something independently. And then after 10, 15 minutes, they switch. And so they rotate through all of the activities. So what that does is it allows you to change up the activity you're doing with the group that you're working with without them noticing. So you can do a different activity with the low-level group than you would with the medium or high level, and they won't notice because they'll be working on other stuff. And then that gives you an opportunity to work more closely with the lower-level students on something that they're struggling with and on something more challenging with the higher-level students. Okay, so the last 2 ways are outcome and task. So I did already kind of mention these. So outcome could be making the worksheets from easiest to hardest. So getting to praise them on their level, and having different expectations for different students. So, you wouldn't expect the lowest level of student in your class to be producing the same work as your highest student. It just, it doesn't make sense. And if you hold the lowest level of student to the highest level standard, they're constantly going to be disappointing you and they're constantly going to be failing, which isn't an ideal learning situation. Then task, I mentioned earlier as well, it's giving them different tasks. As long as they're showing you that they understand the material, does it really matter how they're presenting it? Not every kid is going to be able to write you a paper, but some kids, if you give them the opportunity, could draw you a picture that is going to be cooler than any paper and really shows that they understand the material. So being creative and kind of coming up with ways for them to show you their strengths rather than demanding that they constantly fail at something that they're weak at is ideal for these kinds of students. You can also have a flexi stage. So this is an idea of adding an extra challenge activity into a lesson. So in a class, for instance, you're going to have one kid that's going to finish the worksheet in 5 minutes, and then you're going to have other ones that need 30 minutes to finish it. Again, that's normal. That is how most classrooms are. The kids who are finishing it in 5 minutes, depending on the kid, what they'll do is they will finish the worksheet and then they won't have anything to do, and then they'll cause discipline problems. So something you can do is you can have a routine for when they finish their worksheet, they go and put it in the finished box, and then they take an activity book or something else that you've had prepared for them, quietly go back to their desk and work on that. And then when they finish the activity book, they get some sort of prize, a sticker or a page of stickers or a cupcake or whatever it is. So it encourages them to do this extra work. And then that way you don't have the discipline issues of having half the class finished and half the class still working. And you have the kids that are capable of doing more and getting that challenge. So it's beneficial on both sides. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, so that is all I have for differentiation. That wasn't too bad, 20 minutes. Basically, the biggest thing with differentiation is just keeping in mind that it's really not more work for you. And it really is so beneficial in the classroom that if you start doing it, you'll notice the difference and you'll notice how much more engaged every student is, and then it becomes its own reward. So you're like, oh no, I want to keep doing this and I want to keep structuring my class this way because it's so helpful. So it'll be helpful in terms of discipline, in terms of the kids learning the material, all that good stuff. So yeah. All right, that's that. Thanks.